Thank you very much. If you're just joining us, it's Daybreak on Trust Television, and it is that exciting moment again where we provide deep analysis, conversations around issues that borders on the Nigerian state. This morning, we will be looking at revenues. The revenue generated by the Federal Inland Revenue Service has been growing slower than the expenditure of the federal government in the last 7 years. FIRS revenue collection hit an all-time high of 6.4 trillion in 2021, but Nigeria's fiscal position worsened as the cost of debt service surpassed the Nigerian government's revenue in the first quarter of 2022. Details of the nation's fiscal performance in the first quarter of 2022 show that Nigeria's total revenue stood at 1.63 trillion, while debt service stood at 1.94 trillion, showing a variance of over 300 billion. How can government improve revenue generations to cover its expenditure? We have an expert in the studio, the managing partner, Compliance Professionals PLC, and former chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, the ageless Mrs. IFUEKO Omoigui Okaru. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to see you again.
Same here.
So much has been agitating the mind of the ordinary Nigerian since that medium-term expenditure framework launch, where these revelations came to the fore. Before now, there are analysts and experts like yourself have complained about the fiscal position of the country. And now everybody seems to be on the edge on what lies ahead. Now that it does appear that our debt service has overtaken revenue, we suddenly seem to be issuing a promissory note against future revenues that don't seem to be there. What does the current situation portend for this country from your perspective?
First of all, thank you for inviting me, and congratulations on your anniversary.
Thank you very much.
The question is, what does the current situation, the current fiscal situation, portend for the country? Let me first of all say I'm happy that as we progress year by year, the reality is dawning on more on people than it was in the past. And that reality is that we can't continue the way we have been doing. I think that summarizes it. In performance management, there are what you call lead and lag indicators. A lag indicator is a result you see, but it has taken time to show up. And by the time you are quoting the results you're talking about, the issues that led to those results didn't start today. It started a long time ago. And that is why, as you want to push for improved performance, be it at a country level, at a company level, at an NGO level, at a family level, whatever the organizational setup you have, it's important you also look at lead indicators. What are those things that will lead you to giving you the results you want? And so just focusing on debt service outperforming revenue is the outcome of several things that may have needed to change. And I think for me, the real issue we should be talking about is, have we started addressing those lead indicators? And I don't think we have.
I'm talking about starting. There had been all shades of opinion, if you like, as to where to start. So for some, the argument is we cannot bring this vehicle to a stop because we have to undertake radical changes. Somehow we have to keep the wheel running whilst we replace what needs to be fixed. For others, it has got to a point where we can't continue in this direction. We have to make a radical change. What do you think we need to do as regards starting to head towards what we should do to provide the results that we look forward to?
You know, when you are ill, it starts with a diagnosis. A lot of us, some people have gone to doctors, got a wrong diagnosis, and started working on that diagnosis, only to find out that that's not what they had. And then they start all over again. And I'm sure, listening to me, some will think, oh, but we've been diagnosing the problem for such a long time. And I beg to differ. That we've actually sat down, not as individuals, but as one country, to really think through, and not sitting down to just talk off the top of our heads, but to do what I'll call insightful research, or lean on those who've already done the research to point us as to what are the issues that we need to address. And when you talk about, there are so many different, you said 2 schools of thought, I actually think there are more.
Okay.
There are several schools of thought. You need to do this, you need to do that. Some will say revolution, some will say change the president, some will say do this. Perhaps it's all of that in terms of all the things we need to do, but the question is in what order, in what sequence. And I must say that's a question I'm pondering on myself. I can't say that if I speak to you today, I have the solution. But I don't know whether I should be the only one thinking about the solution. I think you'll bring something to the table, you bring something to the table. The present government will bring something to the table. Past governments will bring something to the table. Those in the trenches, the soldiers, you know, and you know, in strategy, because really it's about how do we strategize our way out of where we are. And I feel that it's a combination of our culture, who we are as people, and the reality that as a country, we're bringing together diverse groups. Even though the truth is we are diverse in language, we're diverse in the way we dress, but honestly, if I sit back, we're actually the same. But I don't think we realize that. And so we spend a lot of time attacking each other. One thing I believe that would definitely help, and that helps in any institution, it's like a family, like I said, the lead indicators. Let me talk a little bit about what I meant there. A family without a leader can get divided very quickly.
That's right.
But it's not just a leader. It's a strong leader. It's a leader that communicates. Okay, and it's leadership at different levels, because when we say leader, there's the head of the family. But there are also those who work within the family to support the leader. So when the leader speaks, or when the leader says things, you execute. And everybody brings different skills to the table to make that goal happen. We spend a lot more time attacking individuals without spending a lot of time asking ourselves, the system that has evolved the leader, should it change? Are there things we need to do differently? I see us, different people trying to aspire for leadership position, but sometimes I wonder, is it to help? Is it truly to move the country forward, and what therefore are the goals? Or is it for power's sake? And a lot of what I see is people love power. But power for what? And then you step back and you say to yourself, well, how have we groomed leaders? How did people get to where they are? And you look at our school system, and you find out that we don't have one school system. Different systems running, even though we have, supposed to have, one Federal Ministry of Education looking at education, pulling everyone together. But what do I mean by school system? What is school? Is school just the 4 walls of where you go to, you carry your bag, you say you're going to school? Or is the press school? What you read. Is the media school? What you hear. Are your parents and guardians school? What you listen to at home before you get into that formal. And how many people actually go to that formal system? So we're building leaders from disparate systems, no common ground. And then we're expecting them to all of a sudden perform magic. How would that happen?
All right, now, so if we examine the issues, how we got here, lots of reasons have been bandied about: corruption, lack of poor management of previous administrations, mismanagement of resources that we actually have, oil theft, over-reliance on crude oil, importing petroleum products, and all of these have been actually bandied about as reasons why we got where we are. But the problem is, a lot of people see that these problems are still there. So even if we take other measures to say, okay, fine, this is how we're going to be able to boost our revenue, let's improve our revenue by bringing in more taxes, just like the government is trying to do right now with the telecoms tax. Let's impose more taxes. You'll impose more taxes, probably get more revenue, but those problems that brought us to where we are still there. How do we reconcile that? How do we make sure that, or how do we put it in perspective that we are not still going back to where we are? Because you're going to impose more taxes, bring more hardship to the people, and then the problems that brought us to where we are now that made you bring in those taxes are still there.
You know, you've hit the nail on the head. And it goes back to what is the root cause. Again, I'd like to use a health example.
Okay.
You say you don't go for the diagnostic. You say you have malaria. So what do? You pump yourself with malaria medicine, but it never goes away. You have headache. You keep taking paracetamol, only to find later that you probably have cancer. By that time you're on stage 4. And so it's going back to what is the root cause of all the issues. So let's take one of the things that we tout a lot. And I remember at the Daily Trust Dialogue earlier this year, and one of the members in the audience said, oh, we're going to tackle corruption. If you recall what I said, how do you hold corruption? How do you hold corruption? There's that it's not measurable. And then when you really think about it, what is corruption? Is it financial corruption? Is it moral corruption? Is it social corruption? It's everywhere. So step back and say to ourselves, let's do something that we can measure. So if it is you want to build road infrastructure, and you know that that's all you want to do. Oh, let me even talk about something more fundamental. Power. People don't realize how significant and fundamental. I didn't even realize. I take power more from the perspective of industry, as important for industry, is important for healthcare. Then I said, because I didn't grow up in an agrarian environment. And then somebody said, you're forgetting agriculture, that even provides food. How important power is to process, the grains, even the cassava that turns to gari, and you see how pervasive power is. Even if we just take that and drive that to success, that will at least do something. We can't solve everything at the same time. I think we also need to recognize that. We also need to recognize that where you have problems, because one of the root causes is that we have this shortcut mentality. Things, you say this, it will turn over overnight. It doesn't. It doesn't. Life is not like that. The principle of life, if that's the case, as soon as you are born, you start working. Exactly. There's a process. That's the systems thinking we need to look at. There's a process that gets you to a particular point in time, but we always want to shortcut. We need to change that mentality because it affects everything. We're talking of a country now where the majority of the population are the youth. And a lot of them have grown up in an environment that perpetuates that, oh, you can get rich overnight. So we're talking about jobs, they're jobs. But the truth is right now, to get people to do those jobs is tough. Let me give you a story. Today I was just thinking, I'm thinking, okay, we're going to discuss economy. And I said, you know that we're losing a lot of skills. A lot of skills. Now, some will say, oh, no, we can rebuild it. You know how long it takes to rebuild skills? Now, that's not to say that if people are angry, they shouldn't do whatever they want to do. There's no doubt about that. You can't stop them. But what's the strategy for harnessing skills? I don't know whether you must be feeling it in the media industry, but there is no sector that is not being hit by the fact that skills are not being built, people want to do things in a hurry. An economy thrives on you having the competence to do whatever you choose to do. And so if I go back to corruption, if we even examine, have we even understood why we are corrupt? So when I talk about diagnosis, why is it so pervasive? Now, I have a hypothesis. I may be wrong. A lot of people are angry. A lot of people feel that they have not been given their due right. And more the majority. And because they've not been given their due right, once they get into, that's what I talk about power. You want to get into position for power, and that's it. Now, this thing that somebody has robbed me of, I now have the opportunity to dictate. That doesn't take us anywhere. So what happens invariably, we're going around in circles. That's what's going on.
Talking about going around in circles, I was listening to some analysts, some economists, and they felt that our basic response in the last 3 years with using the finance bill was to look for a sector to tax. So we're talking about telecom tax today, it's a beverage tax, then SD and all of that. And he feels that tax would not solve the country's revenue problem, even though there are arguments on the other side that tax to GDP ratio is still very low. They talked about selling of dead assets as a way of raising non-interest funds, and stopping the hemorrhage, as it were, with more borrowings. Is that something you subscribe to?
You know, I've been in this line of working on improving Nigeria's economy for a very long time. At least close to 40 years, at least. And the more I hear these kinds of prescriptions, we've been saying it for a very long time, and you prescribe things are done, but guess why it doesn't work? We haven't realized that without a strong ethic, an ethical base, without sincerity of purpose, all these prescriptions will not solve anything. No country can succeed where those executing ideas, are not of one mind. And so for some, it's about themselves, not for the country, not for the people, not for improving the generality, a mass of people, their quality of life. If we all agree that wherever we are here to improve the quality of life of the people and not our personal pockets or family pockets or solving the problems that my community was not taken care of by the past. So it's my time to solve the community's problem. Let somebody else do it. If we don't build fairness and merit, and merit is not to contradict the need for diversity. Merit is not to contradict They need to put everybody on the table. And so if we don't do that without merit, all these prescriptions will not work. Because, okay, so you sell the assets. Who are you selling the assets to? Are you selling the assets to the people who will really work those assets and generate revenue? Or are you selling the assets to your cronies? So it's the prescriptions. If you go through literature, newspapers, articles, 20 years back, it's the same thing we've been saying. So they are fundamentals. And I don't want to just leave it as a value system, because that's just a word.
That's right.
Okay? Because your value and my value may be different. We need to break those things down to saying that until let's first of all recognize that we have to work together and collaborate. You know, something as simple as let's collaborate together as one towards one common purpose. We don't know how to do it.
Let me take you on that. You know, drawing life from what you said in your last statements about being in this space for the last 4 decades. And the average Nigerian would ask, is it for the lack of understanding of this problem on the part of leadership, or the unwillingness on the part of, because, I mean, we see their resumes. If the value systems are lacking here, they schooled in some of the finest institutions in the world. They've been to systems that work. What is so difficult in transporting this knowledge or vitalizing or appropriating this knowledge when it comes to policy and the discharge of the, what have you seen, haven't played at such extreme level?
Okay, one thing I know for sure now, I'm going to be 60 soon, and I've been putting down my thoughts as to if I were to communicate what I've learned over time. Education and knowledge is not just about going to school. You know the funny thing? You may actually have someone who is actually a better qualified leader when you look at what he was taught, not necessarily in school, by his mentors, by the coaches. They've taught you the principles of humanity. They've taught you the principles of merit and fairness. Those things that hit you in the ear doesn't come out. They've taught you fair play. They've taught you to be goal-oriented. What our schools do is they teach you physics, geography, maths, history, literature, but not how do you live together. I've discussed a basic thing as just working together. Let me give a story. Okay, I didn't even finish the other story I was talking about. These days now, you invite, in fact, it was bad before, but it's getting worse now. You invite a plumber to your house. You finish what I finished, the problem has not gone. You call him back. He's working hard, but he doesn't have the skills. The last one, we brought some electrician to fix the bulb. So there was something wrong because it was sparking. Now we can't turn off the light. It's happening more and more now. It's happening more and more now. So let me go back to the question about going to school. There are certain things that we need to re-examine our educational curriculum around and the way we teach. Because I also said, when people ask me, if there's one thing that we need to change, I would say it's education. But it's not education from the perspective of you want to read more about the subjects. That's important. But how do we work as teams in the school environment? The way we teach now is to pass exams. And so what people now do is they cheat. They do anything they want. They want that score. But is life about the score, or is life about the process? We are forgetting the process to getting the results. So going back, is it understandable? They don't understand. Honestly, I've come to that conclusion. Deep down, we don't understand what it takes, and it will take us it will take a long time. But we should not give up because it will take a long time. If you think about the Chinas of this world, the Indias of this world, even at their stage of development, some of the things they're doing now started 1940s. So, and that's why I'm saying, have we started? So I don't think we understand. I don't think we understand the implication of not doing group work in school. I don't think we understand the implication of having a lot of children who don't go to school to learn these things and who are also abandoned at home. Because in other environments, they encourage homeschooling if you can't go to, but we don't understand the implication of years of depriving so many people who now have children and children have children of education, and the anger some people are also bringing to the table. We don't understand those things and how those things play in policy making, in the decision, because ultimately the test of the leader is not so much that you have become the leader. And by the way, when I say leader, it's at every level. It's the decisions you take.
And let's talk about some of those decisions now.
Yes.
We reeled out lots of things. We're spending so much money to service the debts that we actually have, and we're not making enough money. So my question is two-pronged. The first one is quite simple. Can we authoritatively say that Nigeria is broke? And we don't seem to have any other option now because we're not generating enough revenue and we need money to actually run the country. So we borrow, and we keep borrowing and using the little that we generate to service what we're borrowing, and we borrow again, and we keep on doing that. How do we break this cycle?
It's complicated. Honestly, it's complicated, and I'm not even sure this program would take us into all the different dimensions to look at, and you know, let me see. If you put yourself in the shoes of government, you will borrow.
Okay.
Why? Because if you don't borrow, you don't have any cash to spend. Did you get?
Yes.
Now, at the same time, you want to ask yourself, are we borrowing to generate more revenue? What is on the table? And again, I'm not in government, and I know that when you're not in government, there's a tendency you read things, they'll tell you, no, that's not what the reality is, but let me tell you what is out there in the space. Borrowing to pay salaries, borrowing to pay people who say they're being owed money 20 years. So you're borrowing to pay debt, not debt. And those borrowings is, for example, the recent thing on the table, this issue of paying consultants. You know, one of the things when I was in FRS was to stop consultants at the door. But now we're talking about money to be paid to a few consultants. And you ask yourself, did the consultants improve the system? Did they make the system better? No. So I'm going back to the issue that it's a catch-22. You need the money, but it's also important that as we borrow what will give us more revenue in the future, not cash. Because if it's, and I'm trying to distinguish between revenue and cash. Revenues, my definition of revenues, come from systems that are sustainable, that, you know, that replicate themselves, and they grow and they improve, they regenerate, thank you, over time. I think where we need to start halting the brakes is borrowing because of cash.
Isn't that what we're doing now?
That's what we're doing now.
Okay.
And cash takes you nowhere. Because it's coming back to haunt you. Because it doesn't regenerate. Cash is paper. You spend it. Once it's spent, it's
So
gone.
even the borrowing that we're borrowing now is actually part of the problem.
I want to distinguish between the act of borrowing and what you are borrowing for.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? So the borrowing, where there's no revenue and you need to borrow to help that revenue grow, is good.
Very good.
Seriously. And but again, I'm saying it's complicated because it's not as simple as it sounds, as I'm sounding. Okay, so even if you want, it's a systems. I will keep on mentioning, and I hope that's one thing that comes out of this, that to step back and take a systems, because in a system, what you do here affects the other thing. And I think that it's not the borrowing that is bad. I think we need to be more systems driven in what we do. And if I go back to FRS when I was there, and that's a very long time ago, there's a tendency for people to just sort of look at what was done in FRS in isolation. And I would take credit for the amount of work that was done, and we all came together as a team to work on it, but it was not in isolation. It was part of a larger system. And so you turn this way, somebody else is doing something else, complementing that. You turn that way, somebody else. And that's not to say that it was perfect, because life is not perfect. You get things to a point. That's another thing that we need to improve on. Systems thinking again. Everybody will bring to the table their strength. But what do we do when the next person comes in? Do we build on it, or do we start again? And another thing that we have been doing is that there's a tendency, and I don't know whether it's just us, to always look at the weaknesses. You know, I was talking to you about what's your daily trust vision, where are you going, and you talked about you want to do positive, even though I must say there's so much negatives. I want to urge the media to please see how you can increase the positives you project. Because there's a tendency, systems thinking again, the more negative you project, the more negative you are going to get. You know, so we need to be more deliberate. You know, communicate more. We're not doing a lot of communication. I was reading Segun Adeni's column, I think he wrote it yesterday, talking about the water resources bill and how what he had written, and how the minister himself admitted that one thing they have not done is communication, and that they are going to go ahead doing whatever they want to do, and Segun saying that he has understood better. But that's Segun in a column I read that how many people have access to. The other thing that we need to recognize, and I think the reason perhaps people even know what FIRS was about or what we're doing, was because we had this regular program every week, talking, you know, about what we're doing, getting everybody involved, explaining, you know, because of the, again, I'm not excusing, but I've also realized that people don't even want to communicate anymore, because you communicate, they don't even believe you. Even when you are sincere, but that's because there's so much distrust. So that's why I said it's
a system thing.
It's a complicated thing, and to break it, you have to start somewhere and just develop a thick skin and just keep doing what you need to do.
Talking about developing thick skin and communicating more, I would just, for the purpose of this conversation, have you, as somebody who needs to advise the president, what do you think on the short to medium term that we need to fix to begin this whole, I wouldn't call it a revolution, movement that would lead us to manifest the kind of future that we want? I mean, in bullets, what are those things you think we're not doing right, we should take out? And what are those things we should begin to do now to begin to change outcomes?
I think, first of all, I want to say that to the President, we love our country. We love our country. Even those that are leaving, those that are complaining, those that are attacking on Twitter. And so we love our country. You know, we're one family. We're one family, regardless of where we come from. Whether it's Edo, which is where I am, Lagos, where I was born, FCT, where I work, or anywhere else. Sometimes you get the feeling that we're fighting ourselves. We need to bring us all together. And I'm not saying that with lip service. We need to realize that the decisions we take could communicate wrong signals. And if you come across as, and that may not be the way you are, but if people feel that that is the perception, we need to change that perception. And we need to start encouraging ourselves and not hitting ourselves. And building an identity of one Nigeria, where everyone has a sense that that country is for them.
What a way to bring this conversation to a close. We have been talking with the former chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, who has provided various perspectives on what we need to do to get to the desired Nigeria, not the one we currently live in, far from what the founding fathers of this nation had envisaged for the kind of potentials that we have. And she has given a perspective in various, she has given her prescriptions on what needs to change, what we need to do, what we need to stop, and what we need to do differently. I have been speaking with Mrs. IFUEKO OmOIGUI Okaru. I hope I got the pronunciation correctly this time, and if not, I hope you forgive me.
No problem at all.
Thank you very much on this show, and I hope when next we call, this conversation will continue from here. It's been a pleasure having you in the studio. And I said to her before this show started that she had remained ageless. She's sort of find a way to put a stop on age. She's been like this since I knew her. I'm not sure about you at home. And long may it continue. And happy birthday in advance.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Come for that 60th time.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly. That is the senior citizen category. It's been a pleasure to have you join us from home on what has been a very delightful start to a Thursday. We wish you the best of what the day has ahead. I am Sunday Michael Ogu. Let's do this again tomorrow.
All right, that's it on Daybreak for this morning. I am Ibrahim Yusuf. Enjoy the rest of your day.